the deed in the family Bible. You should have just taken the 30 grand, Derek sneered, his boots echoing down the basement stairs of what used to be her father's fortified farmhouse. He and his boss had engineered her eviction, leaving her and her 6-year-old homeless, banking on her being desperate enough to unload this worthless swamp for pocket change. They had no idea it was sitting on a $100 million lithium vein. As Derek lunged into the dark room to grab the briefcase of cash, he had no idea her trembling hand was already hovering over the red federal lockdown switch. He thought he was cornering a helpless single mother. He was about to get sealed inside a steel vault while his boss's empire burned to the ground. The ink on the divorce papers was barely dry, but Rachel Turner's new reality had already settled over her like a weight on her chest. After 10 years of marriage, her ex-husband, Derek Coleman, had walked away with the house, the savings, and a girlfriend half his age. Rachel walked away with primary custody of their daughter, Grace, a mountain of legal debt, and a notice giving her 14 days to vacate her cramped Cleveland rental. At 34, Rachel was out of options. She sat on the bare floor of her living room surrounded by moving boxes. Past midnight, the only sounds the hum of the streetlights outside and Grace's breathing from the next room, where she slept on a half-deflated air mattress. Rachel pulled a battered plastic tote toward her, the last box of her late father's belongings. Walter Turner had died suddenly of a heart attack 6 months earlier. A quiet man who'd spent 35 years on the night shift at a sheet metal plant, he'd lived modestly his whole life, never traveling, wearing the same shirts until they wore through. When he died, there was barely enough in his account to cover the cremation. Rachel opened the tote. Inside were his reading glasses, a few old pocket knives, a stack of crossword puzzles, and his most treasured possession, a heavy, gold-leafed King James Bible. Walter had been quietly devout, though he rarely spoke of it. She picked up the Bible, running her fingers over the worn leather in faded lettering, grief washing over her all at once. "I don't know how to fix this, Dad," she whispered, tears finally falling. Her grip slipped. The book hit the hardwood floor with a crack that split the old binding down the middle. As she knelt to gather the loose pages, she noticed something odd. The spine had been hollowed out, and glued to the inner backing was a thick, yellowed envelope, folded tight to fit the space. She peeled it free. It was heavier than paper should be. Why would a man who owned almost nothing hide something so carefully inside his most sacred possession? Inside was a multi-page document bearing the official seal of the state, a warranty deed. Rachel blinked, sure exhaustion was playing tricks on her, then read. This warranty deed, made this 14th day of October, 1982, by and between the grantor, Edward Colton, and the grantee, Walter Turner. The property description described 45 acres of timber and pasture in a rural county, complete with a farmhouse, 2 barns, and full mineral rights. The land was called Oak Haven Farm. Rachel sat frozen. 45 acres and a farmhouse. Her father had lived in a 2-bedroom apartment her whole life. He'd never once mentioned owning land anywhere. Yet here it was, notarized by a man named Gerald Whitfield, signed in her father's unmistakable handwriting. Clipped to the last page was a tax certificate showing the property taxes had been paid every year, without fail, through an anonymous trust, right up until the month he died. If this was real, everything had changed. She wasn't homeless anymore. But a colder question crept in behind the relief: why had he hidden it? Why live near poverty while sitting on a 45-acre estate? And why take the secret to his grave? By 3 a.m, Rachel was searching frantically on her cracked phone. The county assessor's site confirmed it. Oak Haven Farm was real, registered under Walter Turner's name, its value easily enough to erase her debt, fund Grace's future, and give them both a fresh start. She didn't sleep again that night. By sunrise she'd made her decision. She wasn't waiting for the landlord. She packed the car, buckled a confused Grace into her seat, and drove south to claim her inheritance, with no idea she was driving straight into a secret someone was willing to kill to protect. The drive was a blur of highway and gas station coffee. Grace slept most of the way, clutching her stuffed rabbit, unaware their whole future rode on a folded piece of paper in her mother's purse. When they crossed into the right county, the flat roads gave way to hills and dense old forest. Rachel's first stop was the county clerk's office, to confirm the deed before driving out to the property. The clerk, a heavy-set woman named Doris, looked up as Rachel slid the old document across the counter and explained that her father had recently died and she'd found this among his things. Doris's expression shifted the moment she read the names Walter Turner, Oak Haven Farm. The bored civility drained out of her face, replaced by sudden tension. "You're Walter's daughter?" she asked quietly, glancing toward the back of the office. Before Rachel could answer, the door opened, and a tall man in an expensive suit walked in, silver hair slicked back, eyes sharp and cold. Doris stiffened. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, her voice dropping. Whitfield, the same name notarized on the 1982 deed, approached the counter, his eyes locking instantly onto the parchment under Doris's hand. Then he turned to Rachel with a smooth, practiced smile. "You must be Rachel." "I'm Gerald Whitfield. I was your father's local attorney for years. We were very sorry to hear about his passing." His handshake felt cold. "You knew my father," Rachel said. "Briefly. Mostly through correspondence about the property." He tapped the deed. "I see you found the old Oak Haven parcel. Shame about that land, really. Your father was sentimental, bought it decades ago hoping to build a retirement place, but the soil turned out to be sitting on an old chemical dump. Completely toxic. The county's been threatening to condemn it for years." Rachel said nothing. The tax records had described timbered pasture, not a swamp. Whitfield leaned in, lowering his voice. "Look, Rachel, I know about the divorce. I know about the financial strain you're under." A chill ran through her. How would a small-town lawyer know about her divorce back in Cleveland? "I'd like to help," he continued, pulling out a checkbook. "I'll cut you a cashier's check for $30,000 right now. Sign the deed over to my firm, and you walk away free and clear." For 1 weak second, the exhausted, broke version of her wanted to say yes. It was enough to get an apartment, pay her lawyer, breathe. But the daughter in her, the one who knew her father, held firm. Walter Turner hadn't paid taxes for 40 years on a toxic swamp, and men like Whitfield didn't hand out 30 grand out of kindness. "No, thank you," Rachel said, stepping back. "I think I'll go see the farm myself." Whitfield's smile vanished. "That's private property, Miss Turner, and those roads are dangerous. I'd strongly advise you take the money." "It's my property now," Rachel said, and walked out with Grace's hand in hers, heart pounding. By the time she found the unpaved logging road leading up into the hills, the sun was setting, throwing long shadows through the pines. Her GPS had died miles back, so she followed the old hand-drawn map attached to the deed until the road dead-ended at a rusted iron gate, choked in ivy but secured with a brand-new lock. Someone had been here recently. Rachel grabbed a tire iron from the trunk and broke the chain. The gates groaned open, and a quarter-mile down the drive, the trees parted to reveal Oak Haven Farm. She slammed the brakes. Whitfield had lied, it wasn't a swamp. It was breathtaking. A grand Victorian farmhouse on a hill above acres of green pasture. But stepping out of the car, the beauty gave way to unease. Every ground-floor window was covered from the inside with steel plate. The front door wasn't wood, it was reinforced steel, like a bank vault. Modern security cameras blinked steadily under the eaves. Why would a poor factory worker from Cleveland own a fortified compound in the middle of nowhere? Leaving Grace locked safely in the car, Rachel approached the porch and found a keypad on the steel door. On a hunch, she typed her own birthday. The lock flashed green, and a bolt slid back with a heavy clack. Inside, the air was stale but the house spotless, no dust, no cobwebs, fully furnished, as if someone had just stepped out. But the hallway was what stopped her cold. The walls were covered in framed photographs, hundreds of them. Pictures of her. Of Grace. Of Derek. Photos from the park in Cleveland, from outside Grace's school, from the grocery store, some clearly shot with a long lens. The dates ran for years, right up to the week her father died. He hadn't just been living a double life. He'd been watching over them or protecting them from something. At the end of the hall, a heavy door stood ajar, a faint blue light spilling from beneath it. Rachel pushed through to find a staircase down into what turned out to be a full surveillance center. Banks of monitors covering the far wall, showing live feeds from cameras hidden across the property. In the center of the room, on a metal desk, sat an open briefcase packed with banded stacks of $100 bills, and resting on top, a handwritten letter addressed to her. Rachel, if you're reading this, they finally found me. Do not trust the police. Do not trust Derek. Lock the doors. Before she could read further, the steel front door upstairs slammed shut, and heavy footsteps began crossing the floor above her. Someone was inside the house. Her mind snapped instantly to Grace, alone in the car outside. If whoever was upstairs looked out the front window, they'd see her. Rachel? You down here? The voice drifting down the stairwell wasn't Whitfield's. It was smooth, familiar, and turned her stomach. It was Derek. She backed into the shadows by the server racks. How was Derek even here? He was supposed to be back in Cleveland with his girlfriend. Come on, I saw the car outside, he called, closer now, the top stair creaking under his weight. Whitfield called me. Said you were making things difficult. You should have just taken the 30 grand, babe. Now we do this the hard way. He'd been in on it the whole time. The divorce, the sudden financial ruin, the aggressive push to take the house, none of it had been a midlife crisis. It had been a calculated squeeze, designed to force her into selling her father's worthless estate the moment she inherited it. With shaking hands, Rachel tore open her father's letter and held it to the glow of the monitors. Rachel, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. For 30 years, I wasn't just a sheet metal worker, I was a forensic auditor investigating a shell company tied to Gerald Whitfield. They were poisoning the local groundwater to mine lithium illegally and stealing from blue-collar pension funds to cover it up. Oak Haven Farm sits on the last clean aquifer in the county, and underneath it is a lithium vein worth hundreds of millions. Whitfield needs this land to legitimize his operation. I bought it through a blind trust to stop him. Beneath the letter sat a small USB drive and a printed ledger. I know you're down there, Derek called, now halfway down the stairs, a flashlight beam sweeping the concrete floor. Whitfield's on his way with his security team. They won't ask nicely, Rachel. Give me the deed and I'll make sure you and Grace walk away. Her fear gave way to fury. The man she'd loved for a decade was offering her life back in exchange for stolen millions. She scanned the control panel and found it. A red switch under a clear plastic cover, labeled Emergency Lockdown/Federal Dispatch. Her father hadn't just built a bunker. He'd built a trap. Derek reached the bottom of the stairs, his flashlight landing on the briefcase of cash. He laughed, greedy and triumphant. Well, old Walter really was sitting on a gold mine. As he lunged for the money, Rachel slammed her fist down on the red switch. The basement flooded with strobing red light and a deafening alarm. Before Derek could react, a solid steel door crashed down from the ceiling at the top of the stairs, sealing the basement shut with an echoing boom. Derek spun around, panic replacing his smirk. Rachel, what did you do? I'm keeping the house, Derek, she said, her voice eerily calm in the concrete room. She grabbed the briefcase, the letter, and the USB drive. Behind the server racks, the red emergency lights revealed something she hadn't noticed before. A reinforced storm cellar door leading out to the back pasture. Derek lunged at her, shouting, but she was already moving. She threw the bolt, shoved the door open to the cold night air, and climbed the earthen steps into the darkness, locking it behind her. Rachel burst out into the frigid night, the farmhouse siren blaring behind her, echoing off the surrounding hills. Clutching the briefcase to her chest, she sprinted across the overgrown pasture toward her car. Mommy! Grace's frightened voice carried through the glass as Rachel wrenched the driver's door open. The little girl was curled in the back seat, hands over her ears. I'm here, baby. Buckle up, now, Rachel said, tossing the briefcase, the ledger, and the drive onto the passenger seat. This wasn't just money anymore, it was the evidence that could bring down an empire. She jammed the key into the ignition, threw the car into reverse, tires spitting gravel as she fought to turn around in the narrow drive, 10 seconds too late. Headlights cut through the tree line as two black SUVs roared through the gate and skidded sideways, blocking the exit. Four men in tactical gear stepped out, followed by Gerald Whitfield himself, buttoning his jacket with an unnerving calm, motioning his men to surround her car. Rachel hit the locks, hands trembling on the wheel. There was nowhere to go. Whitfield strolled toward her window, a smug smile forming right up until the sky above the farm lit up. A blinding spotlight snapped on from above, pinning him and his men in a circle of white light as the heavy thump of helicopter rotors drowned out the siren. Rachel looked up through the windshield. Painted in bold letters on the side of the chopper, FBI. Her father hadn't just installed a panic alarm. He'd wired the house to a dead man's distress beacon connected directly to a federal task force he'd been secretly feeding information for years. Before Whitfield's men could react, 3 armored federal vehicles roared up the driveway and boxed in the SUVs. Agents swarmed the lawn, weapons raised. Federal agents. "Drop your weapons, hands on your heads," a voice boomed over a megaphone. Rachel watched Whitfield's arrogance collapse into panic as an agent slammed him against his own hood and cuffed him. Moments later, the farmhouse's steel door was breached from inside, and 2 agents dragged Derek out, hyperventilating, babbling that he was just a concerned husband and this was all a misunderstanding over a divorce settlement. When his eyes met Rachel's through the windshield, the excuses died in his throat. An agent in a windbreaker jogged over and tapped on her window. "Rachel Turner," he asked, holding up a badge. "Special Agent Hayes. We've been monitoring this property's beacon for 6 months, waiting for Walter to make contact. Your father was a hero to this county. Are you and your daughter safe?" Rachel looked down at the briefcase, proof of her father's quiet, years-long sacrifice, then at Grace in the mirror, then back at the fortified farmhouse that was now, entirely, hers. "Yes," she breathed, a fierce smile finally breaking through. "We are now." Rachel's nightmare didn't end in tragedy. It ended in a farm, an inheritance, and the deep satisfaction of watching the men who tried to destroy her lose everything instead. Sometimes the biggest treasures are the ones guarded fiercest by the people who love us most.